Hello, beautiful community. I've just had a cup of tea with you, without you, but I was thinking of you, and I just jotted down a few words to help us do something that could seem like a narcissistic exercise, but it's actually not, because fixing your boat so that it's more seaworthy for engaging with the world isn't narcissistic, it's actually healthy. So, if you want a more analytical chat about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and what's happening today, then watch yesterday's video, the day before yesterday's video if you haven't, or tomorrow's video for that matter. But today we'll just stop and say, how are we following this story? And what do we need to pay attention to? And what do we need to be concerned about? And how do we need to sort of balance our vision and balance our response? This is the worst informational environment that I've ever witnessed, certainly on Twitter, but not only on Twitter. And without catastrophizing, as somebody who intensely and in a way professionally follows political history, this stuff that we're seeing now is not compatible. It's not going to crack our democracies tomorrow, but it's not compatible with the sustenance of democracy. The state of social media right now is just not compatible. You don't get to swim in this mud for 20 years and keep your democracies easily. So it's a concern, and it puts to the center again questions about the democratic accountability of these public squares, which is completely absent at the moment. Given this, and given that a lot of people have visceral emotions about what's going on in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict now, let's say a few things that might help us that are also going to be transferable to how we respond to other things going on in the world. Always don't forget to keep buffers in place, because if your personal limit of what you can put inside yourself is 1 kilo, don't put 3 inside. 1 is your limit. So just that kind of self-love. And sometimes you want to say, no, I should be able to put 3 because these are important issues. Realize that there is a part inside you that could be shooting on yourself in that way. But also be gentle on that part. Don't shoot on the part that shoots on yourself. Be gentle on the part that doesn't want to be gentle on you. The part of you that doesn't want to be gentle on you. You don't need to engage. But if you are engaging, I think that you have some responsibilities as a citizen. And your responsibility as a citizen of any Western country, and almost all of you are citizens of Western countries, from Canada to Germany, your responsibility is not just to react, but to react while trying to deepen your understanding. You're not responsible if you haven't decided to allocate energy into this, but if you have allocated energy, you are responsible to make sure, and I'm making this up a bit, and there's no rule from heavens about this, but you are a bit responsible to make sure that some of your energy goes to understanding and not just to reacting and reacting and reacting. The kind of reacting that is, to the healthier side of the spectrum is reacting to the situation, reacting to issues. The kind of reacting is to the less healthy side of the spectrum is reacting to reactions and to reactions to reactions. And there's a real risk of getting carried away with that. And if you're reacting to reactions on Twitter, that anyway isn't healthy for you, physically and morally. It feels not good the next day. But you're also abstracting the benefit of exercising your duty as a citizen to react while at the same time trying to react with understanding, trying to deepen your understanding. It's important, I think, to ask questions about what am I good at? What am I not good at? What am I seeing well? What am I not seeing well? And often the objection comes, you don't know what you're not seeing if you're not seeing it. If you're not seeing something, you can't be conscious of the appropriate criticism of yourself about that, because it's precisely the case that you're not seeing these things. You're not going to see that you're not seeing it. But I think that can go too far. And I often think you know very well what you can see well and what you can't see. And I think in this informational environment, in this algorithmic bubble, most of you can see really well the experience of Israelis in the last couple of days. I actually think you get it. I think without understanding Israel, without being there, I think there's a risk that we fall short in grasping just what a sort of shock the country is in. But I actually think on the whole you understand. I think you know that you understand. We'll come back in a second to things that we might find harder to understand. But this is a very important question to ask. What am I good at seeing here? And what am I likely to struggle to see? Right? And maybe that's the direction in which it's worth asking questions and looking extra. Always, when there are religiously and ethnically complex conflicts, it's worth just gently making sure you're not falling for some racist tropes. And it's very important not to over milk the relevance of conceptualizing racism to a particular problem. You don't want to go on about racism all the time. You know me, personally, I am very ready to speak about racism in private life. I'm really ready to say, oh, actually, Johnny is a tiny bit racist, yeah. I'm slow to do this in politics, because politics can't just take a personal conception of racism and apply it. You need a political conception of racism. We'll make a separate video about why there is a difference and why the West has recently failed by simply taking personal conceptions of racism and thinking they're going to fly in politics. But here the racism might lie in thinking that Palestinians on the one hand are inherently prone to extreme nationalist religious violence, and that ain't true. Or thinking that Israelis, Jewish Israelis, are inherently prone to keeping a little democracy inside their green line, although they're struggling with that too a little bit. But then outside, they do occupation, military occupation, colonial rule, and a version of apartheid. And that's essential to them. That's inherent to what they are. No, it isn't. For the Palestinians, it isn't. For the Israelis, it isn't. So when things begin to smell of the reverberation of these kinds of generalizations, be awake to that. Let me say something about the moral imagination. When we have a problem with the moral imagination, it happens that the things that are easier for us to see are the things we see, but the things that are harder to see, we don't see. And so, of course, there's a bigger risk in this community because of where you are algorithmically on the social media platforms. You're all supporting Ukraine, virtually all of you. It's easier to feel your way into the experience of Israel and harder to feel your way, for example, into what it's like to be in Gaza, right? And so I'm very touched by how deep the empathy is for the situation in Gaza in this community. But on the whole, I still think collectively we're a bit short on that, you know? And let me not say anything directly political or even directly analytical. Let me just say the situation in Gaza is shocking, and reflecting on how bad it is, even without reflecting on who done it and how it came about, but just reflecting on how bad it is, what it actually means for the people on the ground, even before the last couple of days, is really something that collectively we're short on. And it's a failure of the moral imagination. And it's a big failure of the moral imagination in the entire internet pro-Ukraine community. And what that's like is basically like we're standing in a ditch, and to see is just a couple of inches above our line of vision, and we just can't see it, you know. And moral imagination is a very precious thing, and it is a muscle you can exercise. It's something you're born with, but it's also a muscle you can exercise. And it helps enormously. And you will also be able to use it marvelously in understanding, for example, Ukraine. Understanding, for example, the difference between the pro-Ukraine voices on Twitter and actual Ukrainians in the trenches, what they feel, right? Moral imagination.